Arundhati Roy, Indian writer. 20 years ago, she won the Man Booker Prize for her novel The God of Small Things. Huge. She has devoted the last 2 decades to social activism, political activism, being a thorn in the side of successive governments in India, protesting, writing, campaigning, fighting in the courts. Now, Arundhati Roy has a new novel called The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, which features a transgender woman called Anjun, Hijras they are known as in India, and which describes some of the issues that Roy has been involved with: the war in Kashmir, Hindu nationalism. I spoke to Arundhati Roy last night and told her that I had heard that she had chosen a publisher for the Ministry of Utmost Happiness whose bid was half what the other publishers were offering her.
Well, it was initially, but then when he learned that his bid was half, he doubled it. But we didn't ask him to; he did it on his own.
The God of Small Things was accused, of course, of corrupting public morality in India.
Yes,
are you worried that some powerful people might feel that they're being portrayed in a bad light in the Ministry of Utmost Happiness?
Well, I'm not worried, as in I've been portraying powerful people in a bad light for the last 20 years. So,
It will come as no surprise to them.
No, it won't come as a surprise. And it's fiction, so it's really difficult for them to hang their hat on something like that.
Well, it is fiction, but you are quite specific about a few events and a few people involved in those events. Gujarat massacre, for example, and Prime Minister Modi, who's fairly unmistakable.
In the Gujarat massacre and in any kinds of public events, the public commentary is pretty clear, and also, it isn't as if there are some direct or defamatory allegations there, so it's been done quite carefully.
You seem to have, in the last couple of decades, been fighting a constant battle in the courts, one way or another. Is that just the way it's been reported, or is that how it feels?
Well, it's not been constant, but, every few years there seems to be a pattern where 5 male lawyers get together and accuse me of some outlandish thing that you cannot imagine would be taken seriously, but they are taken seriously. And then once the courts start moving, they move so slowly, and even though you know that you'll never be, rarely, once of course I was convicted, but otherwise it's the process that's the punishment, that you have to keep showing up, you have to get lawyers. The whole idea is to create this kind of atmosphere where you just can't take a clear, deep breath, and you're always wondering what's going to happen. Then you sort of, they hope you sort of say, there's really no point. I might as well not do this. You're always looking over your shoulder or wondering. And the other thing they've done with a lot of writers and artists, and it's a new thing now. No, it's not a new thing. It started with this very well-known artist who now dead, painter called Hussein. But they'll file, cases against you in hundreds of police stations across the country. So it's a way of using the judicial system not directly, but indirectly against people to shut them up.
So the process itself is punishment?
Yes.
It clearly hasn't had a chilling effect on you.
Well, it isn't that it hasn't, It's just that I suppose in a way it's sharpened me. I think the thing is that, if you're doing something like this book, I have written it the way I want to write it. And yet sometimes, like right now I'm under a criminal trial for contempt of court for for a small article I wrote in a magazine about, it was called Professor POW, and it's about a professor of literature who's been accused of being a Maoist terrorist, and he's disabled. He's disabled in a wheelchair. They broke his his wheelchair broke. He was crawling around his prison cell, and they were just. And so I said, you should give him bail, And he was given bail eventually, even though now he's been convicted. But I was charged with, contempt of court, and that case is going on. So it's really, it does, and especially when I was writing this book, I was wearied by all this, these kind of sly attacks on you all the time. But in another way, it just steals you as well.
I know that when you were talking about Kashmir a couple of 3 years ago, and no doubt since, your suggestion that Kashmir should secede, and in fact had never been an integral part of India, that led to threats to charge you with sedition. Did that ever happen?
No, I was not charged with sedition, even though, oddly enough, at that point, the threats and the appeals to charge me were coming from many sort of, TV anchors and so on, like the media itself. Not all the media, but much of the media, lots of the media were, competing with each other for patriotism. But recently, I'm talking about 2 weeks ago, there was a incident of where some strange Pakistani website planted a fake news story about something I was supposed to have said, and it was picked up by the Indian media, and then a Bombay actor said, she should be tied to a tank in Kashmir and used as a human shield. And
good Lord!
This just became like a huge thing with everybody, lots of people on Twitter saying, she should be killed and so on. But then a website basically exposed the fact that it was all based on false news. But that doesn't matter, the website is small, but by then all the TV channels have drummed up all this hatred, and it's very much, it's all planned really. There's nothing innocent or stupid about it. It's all planned.
And yet this is your home.
This is my home, and I love it, and there are plenty of people like me who are dealing with it, and who are rooted to it. And
are there? You feel as if you have a strong community of support and interest around you, because it could be very lonely otherwise.
No. If I were lonely, there would be something the matter with my politics, No. Lonely one always is as an artist or a writer, but that's a universal thing. But no, not at all. There's a battle on in India, and I'm certainly, on issues like Kashmir, there was a time when one was very, very small minority, as in you could count Indian people on the fingers of one hand, but even that has changed now, and many, many Indians are outraged at what is going on.
Kashmir, of course, plays a very large part in your novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. We've been talking about intractable conflicts on the programme today, and I wondered whether you could help me understand what's happening in Kashmir, a place that Pakistan and India have fought 3 wars over.
Well, these are exactly the things that now make me cautious, because, they'll take someone's sentence and then make it crazy. But so that's why I spent 10 years writing this book, complicated and whatever. But the only thing I'll say is that Kashmir is the most militarized place in the world. There's 500,000 soldiers in that little valley. And to explain what's going on there, I did need to turn to fiction, because, just the human rights reports about how many tens of thousands of people have been killed, or hundreds of thousands of people have been tortured and disappeared, and, the torture techniques would what we saw in Abu Ghraib and things. So it's just the same in Kashmir. There's no difference, but India has managed to hide it under this, Bollywoody sort of stuffed toy friendly democracy that is sold because it's a big market now, and people would like not to see the truth about certain things there. So it's the most highly militarized zone in the world, and what is happening is absolutely unthinkable. It's unthinkable. The kind of now you don't have to listen to me. You just look at the pictures. You have little schoolgirls in school uniforms throwing rocks at armed soldiers. The army chief recently said, "I wish all these people were shooting at us instead. Then we would do what we really want to do with them."
Mm. And yet it remains very unreported on because it's one of those conflicts that doesn't involve the great powers, but it does really. I mean, India and Pakistan have both, hurled nuclear tests at each other in the past. I think that was one of the first campaigns that you were involved in after you finished.
They do have nuclear weapons, and Kashmir could well be a flashpoint. But, it's at the moment, at least, it's not about natural resources or oil or minerals. And so there's a fair amount of... It's not that it's not reported. It is. But it also plays straight into this world story of Islamophobia, and, it's so easy to portray the whole thing as some ISIS or Taliban-inspired battle, which is, obviously there are. The more you smash them underfoot, the more that kind of thing will find purchase. But certainly Kashmir was never that place. Soon after the September 11th attacks, there was an attack on the Indian Parliament by 5 quote-unquote terrorists who were all arrested, 4 men and a woman. And then as the trial went on and as the investigation started to open up, it became clearer and clearer that these people were all just set up, and finally 4 of them were acquitted. And the 5th one was hanged, but the Supreme Court in its judgment said we have no evidence to say that he belongs to a terrorist group, but in order to satisfy the collective conscience of society, we are sentencing him to death. And so...
Is that what they actually said?
That's what they specifically said, yes, in the judgment. And before he was hanged, years before he was hanged, I and some of us had been writing, we even wrote a book, a collection of essays, and it was called The Strange Story of the Attack on the Indian Parliament. And everything was out there, and after that, knowing that this was the wrong thing to do, but because it was an election campaign issue, the Congress party, which supposedly the moderate party, hanged him because the right wing was trying to take advantage. And then publicly, even the man who used to be the defense minister and the finance minister said it was the wrong thing to do. They know it's the wrong thing to do, and they still did it,
I'm talking to Arundhati Roy, who's just written her first novel in 20 years. It's called The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. There is much said about India being a miraculous democracy, and, given the heterogeneity of the population, the size of the population, the extraordinary differences around the country, it is extraordinary. But is it a working democracy in your view?
Well, obviously, in my view, it isn't, but it's easy to pretend that it is, and many people want to believe that. But the fact is that even in the great economy of India, you have a situation where, the levels of malnutrition, the levels of unemployment, the levels of ecological disruption, it's crazy what's going on in that place. And right now, all that anger is being diffused by saying, oh, now we have after hundreds of years, we have a Hindu nation, and people are going about openly on the streets lynching Muslims, lynching Dalits, and every day that's there in the paper. These gangs going around beating people to death because, oh, you were eating beef or you were selling a cow or something. You know, but there's a reason why the world doesn't want to see that, and that reason is a selfish one. You know, that okay, this is a growing economy, but now increasingly you're seeing people showing how even those numbers are being fudged. You know,
the God of Small Things was seen as semi-autobiographical, and it was in part written about your hometown in Kerala. The Ministry of Utmost Happiness I'm tempted to see it in an autobiographical way as well, but more disguised. For example, the Hijra, I imagine you feel common feeling with as outsiders.
It's I think it's interesting that a lot of not a lot, but a few people in the West sort of speak about magic realism. They did with the God of Small Things too, but it's actually just the fact that it's a realism that doesn't exist in the West, and so it becomes magical.
No, I mean India is automatically magical and real, isn't it?
To someone looking in, you know, from the outside.
Sure.
But you're right that, you know, it's all the characters in the book are people who are obviously all fictional, but you know, one has lived through those moments in the book very carefully, and there could be, you know, sometimes someone asks me, I say, yeah, I am Anjum, you know, you know, sometimes I feel like, you know, politically one has moved into the graveyard, you know, and even from there you insist on not dying, right? And you know, sometimes like there are scenes where she because she's, you know, the exotic creature for the foreign press, and when she burns all these, you know, press clippings and makes the ash and puts it on her face, and I thought, is that me? You know, so there's me and everybody, even the wicked ones there in the book, but it's I think it's an autobiography of the air in that country, you know.
It's been called a State of the Nation novel.
Well, I mean, though the book and its author have always refused to look at nations as any kind of legitimate unit, you know. And also, I think people miss the fact that it's, you know, there's so many creatures in the book, and the creatures like the kites that drift across the line of control, you know, without any concern for the humans below, and so there's a questioning of the idea of the nation.
It's pretty interesting, you know, that, and I'm not suggesting that this was deliberate in any way, but the whole idea of transgenderism is so topical at the moment, and here you are. It's central to this book.
Well, it's you know, I think it's
a metaphor, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I don't think. You know, for me, the idea is that if you break things down into subjects, you know, like Kashmir, transgender, Dalit, so on, the whole idea is to tell a story where these are all parts of this machine, and one thing is no good without the other thing, because it's a way of seeing, you know, and Anjum is by no means a signifier of that debate, for example, you know, because if you look at her, she actually survived the Gujarat massacre
because she's a Hijra.
Yeah, she's not suffering cruelty, because she's a transgender, she escapes it, and then, but that escape is a different kind of cruelty for her. And she actually is in that moment because she's a Muslim, So what is that identity, the Shia, the trans, it's all the characters in the book, each one of them has a border, an incendiary border running through them. She has the border of gender. Pillow has the border of caste. Biplab Dasgupta is half establishment, half a shambling lover, Musa has the borders of a national border. Saddam Hussein has a border of religious conversion, and each of these borders in India is an incendiary one.
I feel like saying Saddam Hussein, no, not that one.
Saddam Hussein?
No, not that one.
No, not that one. No.
You are unusual, right? In India, most particularly unorthodox. You were raised by a divorced and very independent mother. You had no father present. You belong to no caste. You belong to no religion. You've been described as off the grid. Is that how you see yourself?
Well, except that the grid is a humanly constructed grid, which I don't have any respect for. So being off the grid.
No. I mean, I'm not suggesting that being off the grid is a bad thing.
Yeah.
But you are off the grid,
let's
right?
Let's just say that in India, almost every person, if you know their name, you know where they're from, you know their caste, you know everything about them. And the people who marry outside their castes or religions are under 5%. It's very, very rare.
Is that because it's frowned upon, or because it's?
Yeah, because it's. I mean, one part is it's just the way society has internalized it. And I mean, to me, central to this book, central to the Ministry of Utmost Happiness, is the idea of caste and the horrendous ways in which it is practiced in this country, So, I mean, in that sense, I am a bit peculiar. And yet I'm totally, in a sense, because of that, I kind of navigate many worlds in strange ways.
Yes.
Very, very internal and at the heart of it,
There have been laws passed making certain castes, is it, illegal? Certain castes, like the untouchables, are by law no longer allowed to be discriminated against. Have I got that right?
Yes, of course that's right. But that doesn't do any. I mean, it's good. It's but it's a society in which the Constitution, which was very much drafted by Ambedkar, who was I suppose in some ways the greatest intellectual of modern India, but so the Constitution is in so many ways more enlightened than society itself. And Ambedkar knew that, the laws are not going to change society. But, in terms of practice, it is practiced at the cellular level in society.
I know that you levelled some criticism at Mahatma Gandhi for his acceptance of caste, and I wondered whether that had caused as much controversy as other things that you've been involved in. I don't know what.
The thing is that this is a very complex subject, and I've written an essay about it called "The Doctor and the Saint," about the debates between Ambedkar and Gandhi. So I would be reluctant to, squash that into a little answer. But I think Gandhi is very much, to understand the role Gandhi played in this in this whole battle of caste and the argument of caste is very important. And I would say that Indian liberals and the Indian left, I would fault them for having been so hypocritical and having unseen what is the engine that runs modern Indian society. Caste is a subject, but it's like writing about apartheid South Africa without mentioning apartheid,
Right. I remember, I don't suppose this was or will be to your liking, but I remember V.S. Naipaul saying that India is such a kind of huge, sprawling place that the only way it can function at all is through the caste system.
This is the liberal position, and this is something that is insufferable for me to hear, And as you know, the atrocities against Dalit people being raped, brutalized, burnt, killed, beheaded, castrated, forced to eat shit, students, little girls being forced to clean the classrooms and eat the dust. This is what goes on in that country, and I'm glad that some people think it's the only way that people should survive or anything should survive. How can you say that? It's like someone saying, the only way that America can continue to be America is if it continues to lynch black people.
I know. It's extraordinary. Do you imagine, even in your lifetime, do you think that inroads are going to be made into the caste system?
Well, if you look at this essay that I've written, the caste system has modernized, and it's very much a part of, it has infused itself into modern life in India, into the modern economy. So if you look at the fact, you look at how many Dalits are there in the judiciary, how many Dalits are there in the bureaucracy, how many Dalits are there in the media, the answer is virtually zero. Even though there's this thing called reservation, so there'll be some symbolic, individuals present, but as a whole, it's a very, very serious problem.
So
the creation of a small Dalit middle class has helped, but in a way, it's also helped to keep the system in its place.
So they changed the name from untouchable to Dalit, but the system remains exactly the same.
In official terms, it's scheduled caste.
Right.
The Dalit is the political name that people call themselves.
When you wrote The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, was it in some ways, I don't know, an escape for you? I'm not suggesting it was easy, but it must have been a kind of nurturing place to immerse yourself in a novel when there are so many harsh things going on around you that you've been so involved in.
Well, the novel is, just the act of writing fiction or being able to write fiction is benediction for me. It's like prayer. So it was, for me, all the point is that when I'm writing a political essay, it's an urgent intervention in a situation that was closing down. But when I was writing fiction, everything in you gets play, the whimsicalness, the ridiculousness, the humor, the playfulness, the love of language, all of that, can be unleashed. So yes, it was wonderful for me to have that, even though I was always, it was like a little cave that I would retreat into, but I was always very, the situation being as it was, and the vindictiveness. this government goes after people individually, one by one. So I was very, worried about whether I would be able to finish it or not.
In fact,
before something happened.
Yeah. I mean, did you not leave the country to finish it?
Oh, that was just for a few. No, that was a misrepresentation in the
Right. You weren't fleeing for your life at that point.
No, I was. I was very frightened one day, and I left. But I just went back in about 10 days. It wasn't that I.
But nevertheless, I mean, one is concerned for you. You put yourself out there. You are constantly under scrutiny or attack from the BJP party in general and its supporters. Do you have security?
Well, how do you have security in a situation like that? There are other people also who are being pointed out, and especially women. Any women who stand up, they have these literally these paid armies of trolls, and someone's even written about it. A woman who used to be there in one of the things, and the women are always threatened with rape and killing and death. I mean, it's just the atmosphere is so vicious, but it's a fake thing that's created on a net that they make you want to feel that everybody's against you and all these people hate you and you're alone, but you're not. And if I go out onto the street in India, I don't feel alone at all. I feel the opposite. People are so embracing, of you. And so I think you just have to, I've lived there all my life, and I'm not longing to be some hero or martyr or anything, but you just have to be a little careful. But I'm not terrified for my life or anything.
And that was Arundhati Roy, whose new novel is called The Ministry of Utmost Happiness.